the scream no one in town came running for. A Lakota chief heard her across 2 valleys. The first thing I heard was not her voice. It was her silence after. That is the part people do not think about, the silence that comes when a person has screamed everything they have and nobody answered. I have heard elk go quiet that way when the wolves have them, but this was a woman, and the wolves in this case wore boots. I was moving the gray mare along the ridge above Cutler Creek, 2 days back from the summer council, loaded light. My rifle was across my knees out of habit, not need. The land was dry and brown that late in September. Grasshoppers in the grass, nothing else moving. I could see the Aldrin homestead from up there, the small square of it, the vegetable garden gone to seed on the south side, the barn that leaned. I had ridden past that place 100 times, never stopped. The woman there I had seen twice in the Haskell store, and she had looked at me the way most of them looked at me, which is to say she did not. She looked past. Her husband Luther Aldrin had died in the spring, kicked by a horse, which is an ordinary way to go but no less final. I knew because Running Elk's youngest, who worked at the livery, told me. I had thought nothing of it except that a woman alone on 30 acres was not an easy position. What I heard was 3 horses, and then a man's laugh. I stopped the mare. There were 2 of them dismounted in front of her door. One had a boot up on her porch step. The other was closer to the door itself. I could not hear the words from the ridge, but I did not need to. The posture said everything. And then the door, I heard it hit the porch boards, thrown hard, and then her voice. One cry, short and very high, and then nothing. Silence. I put the mare down the ridge at an angle. I want to be plain about something. I did not go down that hill because of any particular feeling about the woman. I went because of the math of it. 2 men and a woman alone, and nobody in Haskell answering. I have my own feelings about Haskell, and about most of the men in it, and this moment did not change any of them. But a woman alone is a woman alone. That is a thing I understood long before I understood English. By the time I reached the flat, she was back inside. One of the men, the bigger one, wide through the chest, reddish face, had his shoulder against the door. The other one, younger, stringy, was holding the reins of the 3 horses and watching, not helping, watching. I came in at a walk. The big one heard the mare and turned. He looked at me the way men like that look at me, which has its own kind of weight. I have carried that weight so long it doesn't slow me down anymore. He said, "Keep riding, Chief." I did not keep riding. I stopped the mare about 12 feet from him, close enough. I put the rifle across my lap with my right hand near the stock, not on it but near it. There is a language in where a man's hand rests that every man understands regardless of what language he speaks. "Move away from the door," I said. He looked at my rifle. He looked at me. He was the kind of man who was very comfortable with a woman afraid behind a door. He was less comfortable with what was in front of him now. "This is none of your business," he said. "I made it my business," I said. "Move away from the door." The young one with the reins had gone very still. He did not want any part of this. That told me something useful about how this would go. The big one stepped away from the door. He did it slow, the way a man does when he wants you to know he's choosing to step away and not being made to. I let him have that. It costs me nothing to let a man save that much face. "This ain't finished," he said. "It is finished," I said. "Ride." They rode. I waited until they were out of sight, not just moving, but gone, past the second bend in the Haskell Road. The mare stood still under me the whole time. She is a patient animal. Then the door opened. She stood there with one hand on the doorframe. Her name was Clara Aldrin. She was younger than I had thought, maybe 35, with dark circles under her eyes and flour on her apron, and her hair coming undone on one side. She had a cast iron pan in her other hand. She had been going to use it. She looked at me for a long time, not past me, at me. "You came down from the ridge," she said. Yes. I didn't hear you shout or anything. You just came. I did not need to shout. She stood there a little longer. Then she said, "Would you water your horse?" It was not exactly a question. The trough was around the side of the barn. I tied the mare there and she drank. Clara Aldrin followed me around the side and stood watching the mare drink. She still had the pan. After a minute she seemed to notice it, and she set it down on the edge of the trough. She said, "The bigger one is Cord Meissner. He's been coming around since February. First he was asking to buy the place. Then he stopped asking." "I know who he is," I said. I did. Everyone in this part of the territory knew who Cord Meissner was, in the way you know where the bad ground is. She looked at me then, with something sharp in it. "Do you know his brother is the deputy in Haskell?" "I know that too," I said. "So you understand why I screamed and nobody came." I said yes. The mare finished drinking. I should have left. That would have been the simple thing. I had no particular reason to stay and a number of quiet reasons to go, reasons that had accumulated over many years of being the wrong kind of man in the wrong kind of territory. But I looked at the barn leaning in its way, and I looked at the garden gone brown and seedy, and I looked at the door she had been behind, and I thought about Cord Meissner's shoulder against it. I said, "How long has the barn been leaning?" She looked at it. "Since the flood in June. One of the posts rotted through." "Do you have a spare post?" She looked at me again, that direct way she had, not flinching from it, not warm yet but not hard either, just clear. "I have two in the back," she said. I stayed 4 hours that afternoon. The post was not difficult work, just heavy work and hot work for late September, and I sweated through my shirt doing it. She worked beside me without being asked, holding braces where I needed them, passing tools, not talking unless I spoke first. She was not a woman who filled silence to make herself feel better. I have noticed that in people, the ones who can stand quiet without going strange in it. It is not common. When the post was set and the cross-timber back true, I walked the barn perimeter and found 2 other places where things had gone soft. I said so. She came and looked, and her expression did not change much, but she made a small sound that was not quite a word. She had a loaf of bread that she had baked that morning, and she cut me 2 thick pieces and gave them to me with butter she had churned herself. We sat on the porch. The sun was going orange over the western hills by then. We ate without talking. The bread was good, dense and a little salty, the way bread gets when it's made by someone who knows that flour and water and nothing else makes something not worth eating. I said, "Meissner will come back." "I know. Not soon. He is a coward when there is risk. But he will come back when he believes there is no risk." She was quiet for a moment. "What do I do?" This was the thing I had been thinking about since the post was set. "I come back," I said. "I fix the rest of what needs fixing. I am seen here. That changes the calculation for a man like Meissner." She turned and looked at me. Straight at me in the fading light, the way almost nobody had looked at me in 20 years in this territory. Not past me, at me. "Why would you do that?" she said. I thought about it honestly. "Because I can," I said, "and because no one else will." She looked at me for a long time. Then she nodded. Not the way a woman nods when she is grateful, the way a person nods when they have made a decision. That was the beginning of it. I want to tell this the way it actually was, which means not pretending it was simple or fast or without its wrong notes, because it was none of those things. I am Lakota. I have an English name I was given at the mission school, Thomas Swiftwind, which is a name I use when I need to and do not use when I don't. My Lakota name is Tasunk Luda, which means red horse, and my father gave it to me because of the way I sat a horse at age 5, very still, very straight, which he said was not a thing you could teach a boy. He is gone 30 years now. He would have had thoughts about what I was doing, riding into a white woman's yard to fix her barn. He would have said it with his face, not words. My father was like that. I am 61 years old. I am not chief of anything. That word chief. The whites use it the way they use most things, without precision. I was a war leader once, for a summer when I was young and the territory was different, and there was still something to lead a war for. Now I run a small herd on leased land east of Cutler Creek, and I am left mostly alone, which is what I have wanted for a long time, and which is also some mornings a very quiet kind of ache. I went back to the Aldrin place 4 days later, with new cedar shingles for the roof over the east stall. She came out of the house when she heard the mare, and she stood in the yard and watched me tie her. She had a look on her face that I later came to understand was her waiting face, not cold, not warm, just still and reading. She wore it when she was making up her mind about something. "Coffee's on," she said. We had coffee at the table in her kitchen. The kitchen was clean and spare with no extra things in it, just what she needed. One chair at the table had a mended leg, careful work, done by someone who knew joinery. I looked at it. She followed my look. "Luther did that," she said. "He was good with wood." I drank my coffee. She said, "Were you married?" "Yes." "Are you still?" "No, she died long time." She nodded. I said, "Children?" "One, he went to Colorado 3 years ago. He writes twice a year." She said it flat, without blame in it, which told me something about her. Some women would have loaded that sentence. She just said what was true. We finished the coffee. I went up on the roof. She went into the garden. Every so often I could hear her moving around below, and once she spoke sharply to one of her chickens, something with a short word that I did not catch, and a silence, and then I heard her laugh, just a small one, to herself, and I don't know why, but I remember it exactly. The sound of a woman laughing at a chicken. I was up on that roof and I heard it and I held it. I finished the shingles by noon. She had made soup, a thick one with dried beans and a shin bone she must have been saving. We ate. She asked me about the country east of Cutler Creek, what it was like, whether the grass was still good. I told her. She asked careful questions. She had the mind of a rancher, practical and forward-looking, always measuring what something cost against what it might return. I said, "You are thinking about expanding." She stopped. Then she said, "I think about it. I have 30 acres and a dying herd, and I'm not young enough to pretend the hard work alone will be enough." She looked at the table. Luther had plans. He had a whole page of plans. She said that without much color in it. It was not grief anymore, just the fact of what remained. I said, "The country east of my lease is empty. Nobody's running cattle on it. It's leased government land. You could apply." She looked at me. "Nobody would approve a woman alone." "No," I said, "but they might approve a partnership." I don't know exactly when I decided to say that. It might have been on the roof. It might have been before. I said it, and then I drank my coffee and waited. She was quiet a long time. Long enough that I started thinking I had misjudged everything and that I should finish the coffee and ride. Then she said, "What kind of partnership?" "A real one," I said. "Work and land and whatever comes from both." Another silence. "People would talk," she said. "People already talk," I said. "I have not noticed it changes anything that matters." Something moved in her face. It was not a smile exactly, more the shape of one, like the way a smile leaves a mark even after it's gone. She looked at me with something that was not yet the thing it would become, but was heading there, moving toward it the way water moves before it knows it's a river. She said, "You're a strange man, Thomas Swiftwind." "I have been told that," I said. "I don't mean it as an insult." "I know," I said. "I didn't take it as one." That was October. By November I had moved 24 head onto the east acreage, and she had signed the co-lease paper, which the land office in Laramie had approved after 3 weeks, and a letter from the county assessor, who owed me a favor from a time I will not go into here except to say it involved his horse, a bad winter, and a decision I made that cost me nothing but that he never forgot. Cord Meissner came back once in November, late afternoon, riding alone this time. I was at the Aldrin place fixing the cold cellar door when he rode in. I came out of the cellar and stood up and looked at him, and he looked at me, and something moved through his face that I know well. The moment when a man recalculates what he thought the situation was. He rode away. He did not come back. People talked. Of course they did. Haskell is a small town, and small towns talk about whatever is nearest to them and most confusing. Clara Aldrin told me once that Mrs. Pierce, the minister's wife, had said something pointed to her in the general store. Clara told me what she said back, which I will not repeat here except that it was short and clear, and Mrs. Pierce had not said anything further. I asked if it bothered her. She thought about it, not performing thinking, actually thinking, which is different. Then she said, "There's a version of my life where I worry about what Mrs. Pierce thinks, and there's this version." She looked around at the land, at the herd we were watching move through the east grass at me. "I prefer this version." I did not say anything to that. I didn't need to. Winter came hard that year. The first real snow hit in the second week of December, and it did not stop being serious until late February. We moved the cattle through it together and lost 7 head in the January blow, which was bad but not catastrophic, and we burned through most of the hay I had stacked in the fall, but we had enough. On the coldest nights I stayed in the barn rather than ride back across the creek in the dark and the cold. She left a lantern in the barn window on those nights, lit when I was there and dark when I was not. I don't think she thought of it as anything in particular. I thought of it as something. In January she was sick for 10 days, a chest cold that went deep. I brought broth and I brought firewood, and I sat with her 2 evenings when the fever was bad. On the second evening she was half asleep and she held my hand, not asking for anything, just holding. Her hand was small and very warm from the fever. I sat there and held it back, and I thought about a lot of things, but mostly I thought about how long it had been since someone had held my hand. When she was better she did not mention it. Neither did I, but something had been said. The thing about a life that has been long and mostly hard is that you stop expecting certain things. Not bitterly, not with anger, just you stop expecting them the way you stop expecting rain in August. The season for it passes. You learn the shape of your life without those things. You get good at living in that shape. And then sometimes the season changes. In March, when the snow was starting to pull back from the south-facing slopes and the creek was running loud and brown, we were checking the east fence line together. Her horse, a reliable bay named Dutch, went lame in the right foreleg, and she walked him back slowly, talking to him low and steady the whole time. I led the mare alongside. We walked maybe 2 miles that way in the spring mud. When we got back to the yard she checked Dutch's foot, packed ice. Nothing worse, and she stood up and looked at me, and I looked at her, and she said, "I'm glad you came down off that ridge." Not thank you, not the kind of thing a person says because they feel they owe it, just something plain and true. I said, "So am I." She crossed the yard to me then, those 2 or 3 steps in the mud, and she put both her hands on the sides of my face, the way you hold something you want to be sure of, and she looked at me. Not past. At me. At my eyes, my face, all of it, like she was reading something she had been reading for a long time and had finally reached the part that made sense of all the rest. She said, "You are a good man. Not a kind man, not a useful man. Not even a brave man, though she might have meant that too. A good man, which is a different thing, which is the whole thing." I put my hands over hers, both of them, still on my face. The mud was cold under my boots, and the creek was loud, and Dutch was standing there behind her with 1 foot cocked, and the mountains were white above the brown hills, and I was 61 years old, and I had not expected any of this. I said, "I know that, but it's different hearing it." She understood that. She is a woman who understands the weight of things said aloud versus only known. She pulled my forehead down against hers, and we stood there in the mud with the creek sound behind everything, and after a long time she laughed, just quietly, just a little, the way she had laughed at the chicken on the roof that first day. To herself, except this time I was close enough to be part of it. There is a thing that happens to a man who has been overlooked for long enough. He stops asking, he stops expecting. He becomes very good at needing nothing. It is not a bad way to be. I am not saying it ruined me or broke me. I am not that kind of man, and this is not that kind of story. But it takes something from you. Some smaller part worn down. You don't notice it going. You only notice it when something gives it back. I am not a man who says more than he means, so I will say only this. She gave it back. The summer came on and the grass came in thick on the east acreage, and we ran a combined herd of 63 head, and we mended 2 miles of fence, and we sat on her porch in the evenings when the heat broke and watched the light go out of the sky over the western hills. Sometimes we talked. Often we didn't. Dutch was sound again, and her garden was something a person would travel to see. People in Haskell learned a version of us. Most of them learned to leave it alone. A few learned to respect it, not the way people respect what they understand, but the way they respect what is clearly working and not asking for their opinion. Cord Meissner moved south sometime in the spring. Nobody said where. It doesn't matter where. I think about that September afternoon a fair amount. The ridge, the silence after the scream, the gray mare coming down at a walk, the way he had his shoulder against her door. I think about how the whole valley and everything in it came from that moment, from me not keeping riding. I think about how close it came to being nothing. I don't say that to be dramatic about it. I say it because it's true, and because I am the kind of man who finds some value in looking directly at the things that could have gone the other way. It keeps you from taking what you have for granted. I don't take it for granted. These days, most mornings, I'm up before her. I build the fire and I put the coffee on and I stand at the window and watch the light come up over the eastern hills, which is where my land is, our land now, the grass coming in pale gold before the sun clears the ridge. It's quiet. A man could use the word peaceful and not be lying about it. She comes out in her robe with her hair down, still half asleep, and she comes to where I am at the window, and she stands beside me, and I hand her the first cup of coffee, and she holds it in both hands and looks out at the same light I was looking at. Neither of us says anything. We don't need to.